Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining us today. And again, have a fabulous guest on the Intentional Encourager podcast. She is a speaker, a trainer, an author. There's a lot of things that this lady does, and you're going to get to hear her story today on the Intentional Encourager podcast. It's my friend, Piyanka Jain, joining me this morning on the, I shouldn't say this morning. What am I saying? Joining me today on the Intentional Encourager podcast. You just never know, folks. I mean, we don't apologize for mistakes. And like Bob Ross says, they're happy accidents. So, Piyanka, thank you for joining me today. I am sorry that I totally fouled up that introduction. How are you?
I am doing well, and I'm so excited to be here today with you to talk and hopefully encourage other folks.
You have a remarkable story, and you and I spent some time together before this podcast talking and things like that. You have a remarkable story. You have done a lot of things in your life. You've taught yoga. You've done tons of different things. In this climate that we're in now with things, and here's where I want to start. Is there a particular skill that you have taught, coached, trained, that you're calling on from a previous thing that you've done? Maybe not something you're doing now, but something you've done previously. Is there a skill that you're calling on from your past that's helped you in the midst of this pandemic situation that we're in?
Well, I might not call it skill as much, Brian, as much as focus. I'm a lifetime learner. And these very interesting times, I have taken to a lot of learning as a way. It's a refuge for me. It's also a way in which to focus on positivity, because if you're connected with the news, there's just so much negativity. There's so much sort of unknown. And how do you rest in unknown? And the way to rest in unknown is basically being here, being now, and learning and finding new. If you have angst, and if you have anxiety, and if you don't know what the future holds for you, the way to do this, or way to survive, at least the way I'm surviving, is by learning. And I think many people are doing that. So that would be what I would say for folks who are sort of finding this little hard time to be.
You wrote a book a few years back, and I wanted to dive into that, and it's called Behind Every Good Decision. And people are talking about, we see so many of our elected leaders. And I want to go here for just a second, because you talked about positivity, and I'm totally in agreement with that. But it appears as though leaders in different states, and we've questioned here in the state that I live in, we've questioned the decision-making of the leaders in our state and local governments, because, again, we were not hit with COVID like other states were hit with COVID. So every decision maker, their decisions are being questioned. When you look at, and I want to draw from the experience in your book that you talk about, because I love that, behind every good decision. In some cases, we're not seeing good decisions made. What do you think contributes to decision-making in times like this to say, well, is it a good decision? Because now we have the lens of hindsight, right? We have the lens of, maybe in some places it wasn't as bad as initially thought, and in some places it was worse than initially thought. So what do you think in times like these are the key tenets to making those good decisions going forward?
Yeah. Well, and Brian, I'm here in California, so I can't say we are looking behind, really. We are still looking ahead and looking behind. But just a side note, I mean, there's by no means I have any expertise in epidemiology, right? So there's no, I wouldn't claim. We can look at data. I have good understanding of how to look at data, but I have no understanding of epidemiology and how this disease is spread and so on, right?
And Piyanka, I think I love what you just said there, because I think people were looking at data, to your point about looking at data, and I can see, and I want you to answer your question here, but I want to kind of reframe it, if you allow me to reframe the question.
Sure.
I think people were looking at data and making the best decision they could just on data. But again, when we just focus on data, a lot of times there's good data and there's bad data. I've looked at data and I've looked at it, and on the surface, like, wait a minute, I know that this doesn't look good because there are other factors here.
Yeah.
In leadership, and here's where I'm ultimately going with this, Piyanka, and forgive me for kind of redirecting and reframing. I think there are sometimes when people look at data and the first thing that comes to their heart and mind is, oh no, this is not good. And they make decisions with a, oh no, a fearful spectrum and things like that. When we see data that's not good, what should our first thought process be around that data in making a good decision?
And that's a different question, Brian. So I would say,
well, I was trying to get to a good question. My mind wanted to ask a good question. My mind was getting there. And you know, Piyanka, a lot of times when you get to be, when you push 50 like I am, a lot of times it starts out well when it gets here. And then by the time it gets here, it just kind of gets a little muddled. So I apologize for asking you a different question.
You're fine. So the second question, and the answer might be surprising for you or not something you're expecting. But I would say when the way we approach, at least in the world of business, and I think this is widely applicable, you know, data doesn't speak. It responds, and many people expect that data to start speaking, and then you know, if you look at data, you have a high probability of, if you look at data without context, without understanding the real question, the hypotheses and so on behind it, you have a pretty high chance of misreading data. So that's something, and for somebody to read data well, they need to have a good they need to have good data literacy. They need to have some good understanding, because even us, you know, for example, we go into our client engagement, and one of the pet peeves of the clients are like, we have thousands of dashboards, but we don't know what to do with it. Like, we don't know how to make decisions based on that. And part of what's happening with that is essentially data doesn't speak. You know, you can stare at the data all you like, thousands of dashboards, Excel sheet, whatever else, you know, COVID-19 trend, doesn't matter. It doesn't speak. And so the narrative around it, or what's happening, is driven by, or should be driven by, good understanding of what the problem is and what is it that you're trying to understand from it. What are your hypotheses from it? You almost need to frame those things before you look at data. Because, for example, I'll give you one, again, COVID-related example. Initially, when you know, COVID hit us, you know, the numbers kept going up and up and up. But if you actually zoomed in and if you looked at how many tests were being done and how many of them were coming out positive, it was completely correlated, which basically should tell somebody that there's more COVID out there, positive out there, and it's a function of testing. More we are testing, more we are finding. That means the numbers are definitely underrepresented. There probably is a lot more, 5 times, 10 times more already in the community by the time we start testing it, right? So you won't know that unless you frame it properly and you look for the right metric. If you just looked at, and many people, I still see some charts right now where they're showing numbers like California numbers, and they're comparing it across states. California is a big state. You can't compare just the absolute number. And if you keep doing that, you're going to tell a misleading narrative, which is sort of what is happening. And it doesn't mean that the trend, you still can look at the trend, but these are the things that people who don't, if you can paint any story with the data as it stands now,
Yes.
unless you
Yes.
know what you're doing, you won't frame it right. And when when I was having a discussion with one of my friends, and they had posted it on Facebook, and I said, well, California is a populous state, you would know, right?
Yes.
So, and then that they start thinking, oh, right, because these are absolute numbers, they're not doing it per capita. I'm like, yeah, but people don't think about it at the face value of it. You take what is being fed to you,
Right.
and it's not
Yeah.
useful.
Well, we are such a soundbite and snapshot society
Yeah, yeah,
that most people have conditioned themselves, Piyanka, just to take snippets of data and make complex decisions.
yeah.
And take small portions of it. I love what you said there. Data responds. It responds. It is something that the more you get, the clearer the picture becomes. Data, if you allow data to be very myopic, it can be, but you're only going to get this portion of a picture. And I'm for those listening on audio, I'm taking my hands and putting them to the side of my face
He's
so that
putting a
I'm getting
blinder.
I'm putting up blinders,
Yeah.
and data can do the same thing. I guess my ultimate point is I feel like, and I felt like that there were some of our elected leaders that just took a portion of data and said, oh my word, this is bad, this is horrible, instead of digesting it and allowing your natural leadership abilities to come through and really leading proactively, unlike what you were saying, instead of reactively to the response of the data. I love what you said there. That is so powerful.
Brian, I
Yeah.
think one thing I want to add is that there in general there is the data literacy. How literate you need to be at your current role, whether you're in a leadership role as a governor or
That is
as
such a
a
great point,
president,
Piyanka.
as a whatever, right? Data literacy is not as high as you would think. Although we all think now that we have looked at charts and tables, and COVID brought around that transformation that we all want to look at charts and we talk about flattening the curve. Very, very few people really are at the right level of data literacy for what the jobs they are serving. So I think it's whether the decision was right or wrong, and so on. I think there's still the jury's out on that. But how do you go about doing this forward planning? How do these
Yes.
decision makers, how do they come about? They have a lot of context. They have a lot of
Yes.
understanding, tribal knowledge. They have a lot of understanding of how things work in the government, in the public system. And I would say that, this was such an unprecedented time, and many people were under so much pressure, and that they were in the middle of this and they were needing to
Yes.
make decision. I mean, that by itself is a huge task, so kudos to them. However, if they had the data literacy skill as well at the right level, they don't need to be data scientists, they don't need to be epidemiologists, but if they had the right skills, they can engage the right people to come to a better solution potentially. I mean, this is still unprecedented. You don't have a history of it, so it's very hard to make optimal decisions based on history. But I would say that one thing that I take out from here is that overall data literacy, especially for those who are in the public sector,
Mm-hmm.
those who make such large scale decisions, which impacts the livelihood of so many people,
Yes.
if they have the right level of data literacy, or they develop that, I mean, hopefully they'll start developing it.
Yes.
That'll
Yes.
help us tremendously, because then they can actually make good decisions, more likely to make good decisions because it's based on data.
That is so powerful because, again, you have hit on something very brilliant, Piyanka. And the fact of the matter is that our society as a whole, whether you're talking about sales or consumerism or whatever you're talking about, we have become artificially intelligent by this.
Yeah.
And we feel like as a society that all the answers we will ever need are found by Googling. Who would have thought a company would become a verb? Google. Let's Google this. And so we become an artificially intelligent society, and we really don't understand at times, and that's a brilliant point that you made, Piyanka. We don't understand sometimes that we do need to be literate just as we read and understand the English language here in the United States or whatever language you're literate in, you have to not only be able to read it and understand it, but interpret it as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I think especially in this country, we are both in US here. Especially in this country, I think the focus on STEM needs to be bigger. That people really understand the science, people really understand the data, and they start understanding hypotheses. They start understanding
Yes.
sort of framing the problem. And you don't really, again, it's not rocket science. It's just a matter
So
of picking up
true.
some,
So true.
some basic skills. But you would be better served. I think people are more opinionated than informed, unfortunately.
Well, and I want to go back just for a moment before we pivot. I want to go back to the genesis behind your book, because even though your book was written several years ago, Behind Every Good Decision, I think it is so relevant today because decision making, we have seen the impacts of good decision making personally, globally, wherever you want to do it. And we've seen it at a micro level and we've seen it at a macro level, the power of good decision making and then the power of poor decision making. What is the biggest obstacle that stands in someone's way in making a good decision?
There are many obstacles, Brian. I mean, there's the assumption of good data. Like, so the data maturity, you need to have good data. If you don't have good data and you're still trusting the data you have in front of you, you haven't necessarily made sure it's good data.
So you have to have the right picture. Is that what you're saying? You have to have the right picture.
Yeah, you have to have the right underlying foundation, right picture, as you say. And then you need to have curiosity and be not so sure about, I know it all. Many, I think that's what I was saying. People are very opinionated, but they're very less informed. Many people think they already know it all. Like, they see something, they already make their conclusion, and they use then data to back construct whatever they want to say.
That is so true, Piyanka.
And that doesn't help, because unless you're curious and unless you're humble that, hey, I could be wrong. Let's just figure out what this is saying. I think, especially in US, and at least especially in these social media, I see there's so much opinions floating around, but not that sort of really humane and humble curiosity. Like, really, what's going on? And I want to learn, right? That's sort of so much missing. And then, of course, then on top of that, there's the ability to look at and formulate that question, those hypotheses, and the ability to look at data and to make surmise in a proper way. That's data literacy. That's also sort of missing. So, those are probably the broadest area. But I would say that curiosity kills. Curiosity is killing us. If they don't have, the lack of curiosity is killing us, because we are all thinking we know it all. We are all tending to be epidemiologists, or we are all tending to,
you're 100% right. And I've got to ask you this before we pivot. And I want to get into your story, but this question is burning right now off of what you just said. How hard is it and you work with leaders in business all over the world. You work with leaders that are using data and things like that to make decisions. But how hard is it for leaders today to have those difficult internal conversations with themselves around the picture that they're seeing? Because it feels to me as though the one thing that stands in our way a lot of times in making good decisions is that we're not able to have those hard, difficult conversations internally before it comes out externally.
Yeah, I mean, and what you're alluding to is one of the 4Ds we talk about, as and as organizations build a culture of data. One of the pivotal 4Ds, we talked about data maturity, which is good data and all of that. The second one is data-driven executive. So if the executives are not data-driven, they're not necessarily having curiosity. They don't have doubts in their mind about, do I really understand what drives growth for me? What do I understand my customer? If they don't have doubts, and if they don't have curiosity, and if they are not looking to data to actually hopefully prove or disprove their ideas or hypotheses about business, then we are in trouble. However, the good news is COVID-19 hit, and I don't know, you might have seen that meme which talks about who brought in the digital transformation for my organization, the CEO, the CTO, and then COVID-19.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So,
COVID-19 is running a lot more businesses than any CEO thought about doing.
right. That's another thing, the innovation which is coming about. But the point being that really, and so many, you've probably seen, Brian, and in the news, so many retailers have already filed for bankruptcy.
Yes.
I mean, those who were not managing their business well, their margins were small, their margins are wiped out. Now, those who had fat margins, they have slim margins still. The revenue has come down, the cost has sort of stayed up or whatever else. Your margins are low. So the organizations now are using this because if your margins are small, you have to operate with small cash flow. I'm not talking about apples of the world, but most organizations, right? They need to make sure that every decision of theirs is optimized, or more likely than optimized. They can't just do 100 things and hope 10 will stick, because those 100, the budget to do 100 things is gone. Now they can do probably 20 things and hopefully 10 needs to stick. So your probability that your bets have to be better. And the only way for the bets to be better is if not only the executives are data driven, but every individual decision maker who's spending their 100,000 budget or a 50,000 budget or a 300,000 budget or the $3 million budget, they need to be optimized. What are the 10 things they need to do to find the best bet?
It seems like Amazon was already primed for that, because again, they were ahead of the curve in getting this vast array of products, because if you look at their symbol, it's from A to Z. We can supply anything.
Yeah.
And this pandemic just played right into their wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Because now they were like, well, okay, well, no one can go anywhere. You don't need to go anywhere. What you've been doing already, you can continue to do, because we're Amazon, and we can. They showed me the epitome of like, it doesn't matter what the business climate is, they're going to be just fine, because they figured it out.
Well, the wind also blew in their direction. So all of the retailers or face to face or a mom and pop shop, the retailers, restaurants, they sort of gave their revenue up to these big, huge online retailers.
I love what you said there. The wind blew in their direction. I love that. That is so good.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, they took the advantage. But I mean, even regardless, if you look at Amazon, look at their recommendation system, look at how they are, upselling, cross-selling. I mean, this company is data driven, and why this is one of the most digital elite companies out there. Right?
Oh, they know everything. They know their data like the back of their hand, Piyanka. They know it so well. And not only do they know it, they allow their data that has been proven. They know their data is good, and so they use it to drive their decision-making process in a way that's almost foolproof, because their data is so good and they know it inside and out. To your point a few minutes ago about data literacy, they are so competent. They have a PhD in data literacy. They know it so well.
Yeah.
And they have, a lot of companies, and I wanted to take the conversation in a different direction, but I've got to park here for just a second. A lot of companies, and I live in West Virginia, so if you're watching this video, I'm going to give you a video illustration. So years ago, people that planted crops that wanted to know when rain was coming, they would do this. They would lick their finger and they would stick it in the air. Yeah. And that's the way that they could project and kind of predict what was going to happen. And of course, now we don't have to do that. Our weather forecasting is really good. It's gotten to be phenomenal.
Yep.
But Amazon and companies like Amazon just continually looked and saw and felt to some degree, and they said, okay, where's the wind blowing? Mm-hmm. And if we're there already, we know how to go in that direction.
Yeah.
And in many cases, Piyanka, it seems to me, that not only did they know where the wind was blowing, but they knew where it was going to blow. They knew the speed, they knew the direction, and they already had a plan, a forecast for how they were going to react to it. It's beautiful. I mean, it's just so brilliant. And these other companies had to react and go, oh my goodness, how are we going to survive? How are we going to thrive? I've got to ask you this.
Yep.
Everyone has a story that gets them from point A to point B. And that's what we want to do here on the Intentional Encourager podcast, is tell those stories. Piyanka, I want you to tell your story, how you got from point A to point B, how you got from where you were to where you are now, and take us
Oh,
through that.
how much time you got?
Well, you know, we may have to
This,
schedule a second Intentional Encourager podcast.
exactly,
But
exactly.
but again,
Well,
I think it's a part of everybody's journey.
I know, yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so
So
tell me
I
your
would
story.
say I'll pick some important things from my life. I would say growing up, I knew I had skills in math because I was I would be in sixth, seventh, eighth grade, and I was solving problems from 10th graders, and I was solving theorems and proving them instead of using them. So there was a lot of those things happening, and my math teacher was sort of always proud and showcasing me. So I knew there was that, right? There was that aspect of me. I loved math. My dad was an engineer, so there's a definitely affinity to that. Some of that was there, and then at some point during my bachelor's, I went and did engineering, civil engineering, and during my bachelor's, I started working with my dad, and he was a true inventor and pioneer in waste to energy field in India. And so he would work on some of these really, really, you know, out of the space kind of research stuff, and he would be like talking about that so excitedly. And when I would listen to him often, and he would be talking about presenting in this conference and that conference, and I would ask him, so what does this enable us? Like so what?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where sort of I realized that I'm also a so what person. I love math, but I'm not theoretical. For me, it's all applied. So what is very important? What are you going to do with this now that you have this technology, now that you have this invention, now that you have this? So what? What impact would it drive? And so there's a little bit of understanding I understood. Regardless, I actually came to US on a PhD track. And I started doing my work in environmental engineering, and I gravitated again towards math and quantitative methods. And I was looking at radioactive spills and predicting radioactive spill speciation, what was originally on the site, and so on. And then I realized, I don't know enough in this subject. So then so after my first master's, I stopped track on PhD, and I went to do my PhD in computer science and AI. At that point, I'm a couple of decades ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I realized again when I was working with one of the leading AI professors, Dr. Maria Gini at University of Minnesota, and I was talking, and I was working on that, and then realized, wait, I am really a so what person. So I love understanding the optimizations and the theories and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But really, if I can't apply it right away, I get really impatient. And so, with due respect, I told Dr. Jeannie, I need to stop after masters, and she was so disappointed. But I told her that my truth is the so what. So the so what has to come. But anyways, I graduate with my computer engineering degree, and I come out, and I'm doing my developer job, and I realize, actually, I love coding, but I'm not suited for developer job because it's dry. I'm just using one part of my brain, and I'm not using the creative side of my brain. And it's not satisfying. So I did several coding jobs, web developer, and then core infrastructure development, and so on. And and then I kept quitting, and my family would be like, oh God, like, do you really know what you're doing? You have 2 masters, you're doing jobs, and you're keep quitting them, and they're high paying jobs. What's wrong with you, right? And I just said, I don't have it. I have to feel excited about what's this. This is not doing it for me. And I got that from my dad, I think, because he was always excited about his job. For him, his whole passion was waste to energy. Creating energy out of nothing was just his passion. And so for me, I was like, I have to live my passion. This is just not doing it. And it was sort of hard because when you don't know and then people are surrounding around you, like, clearly you are clueless. You're so hyper qualified, and then you're
Yeah, what
doing
do you
nothing
want to
with it.
do? Yeah, what is it ultimately that you want to do, Piyanka? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. And I was, I remember I was in Arizona and I was bumming. I mean, I finished my master's and I'm bumming around. I'm actually doing pottery. So for 6 months or something, like 4 to 6 months, I got really good at pottery after my
That's
two
awesome. That's
quantitative
really
math.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, I did two master's degree. I'm like sitting here from morning. The pottery studio guy, he gave me, I mean, the owner, he gave me the keys because I would be the first one in. So I would open the studio for him. I would be on those wheels throwing from morning till evening. I don't know. And my family was like, "What's going on with you? How can you keep going in such extremes?" But what was that was pointing to me was I needed the satisfaction of my creative expression as well. So that all of that happened, and then I also founded a company. I did some coding job. Like I said, I didn't find satisfaction. I was then in Bay Area. By that time I had reached Bay Area, California. And
Mhm.
then I did some coding job, didn't work, and then I started a out of box media company out of the blue, which was putting ads on pizza boxes and Chinese boxes. And it was really cool, a lot of fun, very hard operationally, a little bit ahead of its time. And after a year or so of running that, I sort of folded that. But I had a lot of fun doing that. I had a lot of learning. I didn't make any money, but it was good fun. So it was my mini MBA, I would say. This was my
Mhm.
third MBA
Yep.
without paying for it. And then I was just scrolling through the job list, and I was like, at that point I was just like, oh God, I'll just take any job because I clearly don't know what I'm doing. And I was just scrolling through. I was interviewing for product manager job, still some developer job, kind of like not really willingly, but like, okay, at least I should get a job. And then I was scrolling through Craigslist, and I found this job at Adobe of senior analyst. I read the description, and my entire every cell of my body said yes,
Yes.
this is me, because it talked about solving problems. It had a significant understanding of, like, understanding of business. Like, it was part of advertising and marketing, so a lot of
Mhm.
creative aspect to it. And it was going to use my data, that time analytics, now data science background, which is quantitative and math
It was going to
algorithms.
tap into what you really liked.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that time. So I was so excited about this job. I made my resume. I show up for this interview, and I am so excited that I'm like, this is like my dream come true. I'm interviewing, and the hiring manager, he Jackson is his name. He was interviewing me, and he sort of, after all of those interviews, he made me an offer right after the interviews on the spot, saying, I can't believe I'm getting somebody like you. And I'm like, oh, I can't believe I'm getting to do something like this. So it was just like unbelievable. And from there, basically my data science and analytics journey sort of started. And so it took me a while. So the long and short of this is, I knew some aspects of who I am, but
Yep.
I didn't fully know and then analytics was not even known at that point as a career.
Mhm.
And I did not know what is it that I was looking for, but I was not willing to put up with just average and say, oh, I'm not liking this, but I'll still stay and persevere through it. It just was not me.
So let
And
me
finally I
ask you
found it.
this. So let me
Yeah.
ask you this. As you're going through this journey, and I think in life, Piyanka, and that's what's so beautiful about life is you can be from the Bay Area, coming from India, and I can be in Appalachia, in West Virginia, but things connect us.
Hmm.
Things connect you. I had a similar journey. I've kind of taken the winding path to where I've gotten to today.
Hmm.
My question to you is this: what was the biggest obstacle that you had to overcome in the midst of that journey, and what lesson did you learn from it?
I think in a way the biggest obstacle is yourself, and then the belief and confidence in yourself, especially because people question, they don't understand. They are not in the inside of your heart and your mind, and they don't understand what you're doing. You also don't understand what you're doing. But if you What helped me was that belief that I'm getting ready to be ready, that I'm getting ready for something. Something is coming. I don't fully understand it, and resting with the unknown. And that there's a lot of fear. I mean, most people have a lot of fear. I also have fear of of unknown, right? Like, what's going to come? Like, what am I doing? Why am I quitting? I joined Google pre-IPO and I quit. So it's crazy that you would do some things like that, which does not make sense from the social, when you look outside in view. But holding steady in your inside, saying this does not feel good, and trusting that gut, trusting that inside, and knowing that you're on the path, because like when one never knows where we are headed to, we have to sometimes take a left turn and sometimes take a right turn, and it's not wasted, because all of those experiences add to our understanding of the fabric that we are creating. What do we want? It refines us. For example, like, I tell a lot of my cousins back home, because in India there's still a lot of arranged marriage, and I had a similar experience, and I tell them, you know, date a lot, go out with a lot of people, because in that sifting and sorting, in that going and experiencing, every time you are with a person, you learn a lot about yourself and what you want. And if it doesn't work out, that's fine. And the
So
next
true.
person, you learn a little bit more. It's the same thing in life. If we can experience things, one job, I did one coding job, then I joined Google, and then all of that, it all added to my own understanding of who I am and what do I like. This aspect I like, that aspect I like, and be courageous to say, to live your own truth, to say, yeah, this is not feeling good, I'm going to quit, or I'm going to look for an alternate. uh, to have that courage and know that universe has you, that you will find it. Even if you don't have it right now, you will find it. But you just have to try different things, and it's not wasted. You're building skills, building understanding, building diversity in your own mind,
Hmm.
towards that, getting ready for that next thing that will be your dream come true.
That is so good. We could talk for hours, but our time is limited today, and I just want to thank you again for joining us on the Intentional Encourager podcast. What's your single biggest piece of encouragement for someone out there that's listening to this conversation, listening to your story, and going, "That's me. I'm searching for where I want to get to, or I've gone down a similar path." What
Yeah.
piece of intentional encouragement would you offer those folks, Piyanka?
I would say 3 practices that will serve you very well. If you aren't doing it already, think about doing that. One is meditate, whatever form it takes, whatever religion, whatever spiritual practice you have. Find a time to quieten in your mind and to get one-on-one with yourself and your larger self. Uh, Whether takes the form of praying, whatever form it takes, find that time to connect to the larger self, because our rational mind is a small subset of what our bigger potential is. So on a daily basis, find a time to connect. Second is, have a gratitude practice, whatever it takes. Again, writing, expressing, be grateful for what you have in your life, because that'll keep you focused on the positives of the world, positive things that are going. We all have things that we can be grateful for in our life. Whatever tragedy has hit us, whatever has happened to us, we still have things to be grateful for. If you keep focusing on that, more of those will come. And third, keep learning. When we stop learning, we literally die. So keep learning, keep an open mind. Doesn't matter. You can be 60 years old, you can be 2 years old, you can be whatever. Keep learning, and I think you'll create something that will keep serving you.
Piyanka Jain, this has been so good. I have enjoyed it. It's conversations like this, folks, that I really enjoy, because we've covered a lot of ground, and I'm so grateful for your time. Please tell folks where they can connect with you and find you on social media.
Sure, yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. So if you find me on Piyanka Jain on LinkedIn, you can follow me, or if you have anything specific, you can connect with me and have questions. I'm also on Twitter as Analytics Queen, so you can follow me there as well. And lastly, airing.com. If you have some specific needs in data science, data literacy, we have an academy, as well as we have corporate work that we do. So airing is ARYNG, airing.com. And from there, you can find us, connect with us.
Piyanka Jain, that's PIYANKA and Jain spelled Jain. Find her on LinkedIn, as she said. Analytics Queen. I love that on Twitter, at Analytics Queen. And then also Aryng, ARYNG.com. Piyanka, what a great treat it's been to have you on today. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
Thanks a lot, Brian. It was a pleasure.
My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through His Word. And until next time, remember, everyone, everywhere, at any time, and any place can be an intentional